Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
Warren Ingram is a co-founder of Galileo Capital, a certified financial planner, and joins us regularly on a Thursday for our personal finance feature. Money, anxiety, mental health. Oh my goodness me, Warren. The reality is, even those who have plenty of it don't often appreciate that there is plenty. Those who have too much of it worry because they need to then manage all of that money so they don't lose it and make sure that future generations can benefit from their largesse and they can go down in future Christmases as the legend who provided everything. Well, that's what they hope. And then the vast majority of people simply don't have enough. And all of these different stages freak people out universally, I suspect.
You're right, Bruce, and I think it's a big issue that builds and builds and builds over time. I think when we live just with general uncertainty, whether it's worrying about your job or worrying about the economy, and now the United Nations says we're in a boiling climate, there is a lot that kind of layers up stress on us. And unfortunately, money is very close to home for most of us, and actually, is probably one of the two or three biggest sources of stress that we all deal with every day. And add to that kind of particular uncertain times, when we've come through something like a pandemic, and then come out of that and get into massive rising interest rates causing huge additional stress. It's no coincidence that we have now a kind of a mental health crisis that followed a normal health crisis, and we're all living with it right now. The problem, I guess, is that it's not really socially acceptable to kind of sit down with your mates and say, I'm going through a mental health crisis and it relates to money and a whole lot of other things. It's something generally we won't talk about. It's generally not acceptable to tell people you're struggling. You're just supposed to say, no, I'm fine and everything's good. But we are living with it right now. And I think it's an issue facing a lot of people, and something we probably need to spend a bit of time talking about more regularly and make it a little bit more acceptable for people to kind of put up their hands to say, I'm not okay, I'm not really coping, and I need some help, or I need to just talk about it.
What are the most common fears that you see in terms of money? I'm guessing the fear of scarcity is probably the strongest.
By a country mile. I think people fear running out, or fear not having enough, and for people that live with crushing debt, it's not a fear of something that's a fiction. It's a fear of where they are right now. If you look at that situation, you mentioned at the introduction, people have a scarcity mentality around money, even if they have enough, because it's kind of a hardwired response. If you're worried about not having enough, then there isn't a magic number where you would say, well, I've reached $1 million or 10 million or 100 million, and I'm okay now. There will always be a source of fear about things that you perceive could go wrong. And I'm not saying people kind of create fictitious reasons, but they'll just only see threat. They'll only see negativity and kind of potential harm to their financial position. And as you say, they might be planning to kind of look after their children and potentially set up funding for grandchildren that might not even be born yet. But they live with this tremendous fear that life is not going to be okay. It's going to work out badly, and the pressure mounts. And then I think on the other end of the spectrum, people frozen, by fear. So sitting in a situation where they are in financial difficulty, don't know what to do, and so they tend to avoid their money problems. They tend to hope they just go away. They don't read the email statements. They don't look at the apps, and the problems just compound and the pressure builds. And I think for me, probably it's two sets of people in completely different socioeconomic categories, but actually living with the same thing, which is just crushing fear and no real kind of sense of how to exert control and to take control back again and do something about the fear so that it goes away and they feel like they can drive their lives forward again.
How then do you overcome that fear? Because when you have, you may have nothing, you may have a genuine reason to be frightened, you may be unreasonably frightened, you may just be apprehensive, whatever it might be, but how do you seize control of this deeply destructive emotional response to a fear of a shortage?
I'm going to throw some not money jargon, but some psychological jargon at you, Bruce. And it's something I've been reading about quite a bit recently, and it's called hypervigilance. And I suspect all of us in our beloved country deal with this in one form or another, and some of us might have it more and some have it less. But it's it's really something that we should kind of read about a bit more if we get the chance, because I think it's hypervigilance means we live in a state where we feel under threat, where we feel that something bad is going to happen to us, and it's again, it's not necessarily imaginary. It's not just a psychological kind of problem. It's usually based on past experience. So whether it's trauma from all the change and the pressure that we're dealing with, that is specific and unique to living in South Africa, or just more generally, where you feel under threat, you feel that there is danger, whether it's kind of global economics or global politics, or very specific to South Africa, where you feel in fear from crime, whatever the deal is. When that builds and that fear sustains for a long period of time, eventually what happens is we get to the point where we always feel under threat, and so we're not capable then, when you're in that state of hypervigilance, to kind of take a nice long-term rational view where you listen to the good long-term planning that we always speak about. What happens is your time horizon is the next hour or the next day, and all you're doing is trying to protect yourself and your loved ones from threats, and all you see is threat. And I think we're in that state now, a lot of us, whether it's load shedding, where we just can't see how there will ever be a solution, or the rand was at 19 rands to the dollar, and you and I are doing our best to tell people that this cycle will pass and things will turn and things do improve again, and someone in this state would not see that. They would only see the possibility that
it
best case is that
it becomes impossible. It absolutely becomes impossible. And goal setting, I'm going to pause here for a second, but I think goal setting is really important, and it's easier said than done. And I'd like you to apply your mind to this idea of how you set goals when all you see is danger. I mean, all you see is a tsunami coming at you, and now you want me to sit down and plan goals. All I want to do is turn around and run away. I'm never going to outrun the tsunami, but this is my instinct, is to turn around and run away. And you want me to sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and write down goals, climb tree, or whatever it might be. Talk to me about goals in just a moment. A quick question for you this evening, not you, Warren, although you can answer it if you like. South Africa and the International Space Station this week have something. No, it's not the International Space Station, actually. It's actually mission control at NASA. Mission control at NASA and South Africa had something in common this week. What is it that they have had in common this week? The mission control at NASA and South Africa, what have they got in common this week? While we chat to Warren about personal finance.
The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
So what does the Johnson Space Center in Houston, we have a problem. What does it have in common with South Africa? Well, Mission Control had a power outage. They had load shedding or blackout. Call it what you like. NASA says neither astronauts nor the International Space Station itself were ever in any danger. Fortunately, despite plenty of political turmoil between the US and Russia, the communication channels with the Russians actually allowed ground teams to get in touch with crew members 20 minutes into the outage, and everything was absolutely fine. But yes, power outages. I mean, they dealt with theirs quite quickly. We've been going for 15 years. It sounds like a Sinead O'Connor song. Setting goals, Warren Ingram. How do we set goals when it feels impossible to do so?
it's one way to start getting a sense of control again. When life feels that it's completely out of control, we know the solution is not to avoid everything, but actually just start with a really simple, very basic kind of path of steps that you can take. So for example, if you've got a debt problem and it feels that it's crashing and you don't know what to do, start by just simply writing down all the debts that you've got, and next to each of those debts, write down the ones that are costing you the most in terms of interest rate. So the one that's costing you 25%, might be your credit card or a personal loan, and you've got another one which is a home loan, and that's costing you 12%. Once you've written it all down and you can see which ones are costing you the most, then develop a plan to say, okay, what I need to do is pay down the one that's costing me the highest interest rate first. So develop a plan and just take one step. Today, the step is write everything down. Tomorrow, look at it and say, okay, I've now got the numbers. I know what's costing me the highest interest rates. The following day, you start by saying, I've got a little bit of extra money in the budget somewhere, because you're going to have to make that plan. And I'm going to start paying off the most expensive interest rate first. It's taking something which is overwhelming and just absolutely crushing, because it just seems like this massive mountain that you've got to climb, and break it down into some tiny little steps that are really practical and really easy for you to do. But you have to do that. You have to say, what can I do, and what little steps can I take that are not overwhelming and not intimidating and crushing me, and start. And just every day do one little thing to kind of start your life and exert control again. And it's amazing that once you start, once you take those little steps, you start to accomplish more and more and more. And eventually you get somewhere. Eventually you start to make progress. But the one key thing is you do have to make some plans for yourself. You do have to exert control. You can't just let this, let something that just seems so big and overwhelming just carry on. Unfortunately, what happens with money is money troubles compound against you, and the problem just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's just not a space to be. So first big step is take some control and do little steps. And if you don't know what to do, talk to somebody. Talk to someone that you trust, that you know well, that has some idea about money, and sit down with them and just kind of play open cards and say, this is where I am and I don't know what to do. What would you do and how can you help me? And if you've got no one you can trust, maybe just engage someone, pay someone for an hour of their time, pay an expert that can just kind of sit down with you and talk it through with you. I think the point there is there are lots of resources available to you. The starting point is just kind of taking ownership of the issue and saying, I've got to do something about this, and who can help? And then pick up the phone somebody and take action. And don't do big things, do small things. It ties in, Bruce, to I think the literacy thing, understanding. The more you know about your money, the more you know how your money actually works, whether it's debt or whether it's investments. But just arming yourself with a little bit of information, listening to this show every single day starts to kind of prepare you for things. Starts to understand that this is not as scary and intimidating as you think. But the only way you can do that is to pay attention and start learning, and don't just outsource it and ignore it. You've got to take control of your money and your education around money. It is your life, and it's yours to take control of.
I wonder whether you get the same sort of flood of endorphins from making progress in solving financial problems as you do from having a nice meal or falling in love or whatever the case is. There's got to be some sort of chemical reaction deep inside your body that gives you a sense of relief that goes, okay, I've decided to act. I've decided to take action. And I've got a hell of a mountain to climb here. But my goodness me, I'm so glad I've started.
I think it feels, maybe the best analogy I can think of is that it goes from this absolute crushing backpack that you've got that weighs, double the weight that you weigh, and it's impossible for you to just even, get yourself off the ground and take one step. Once you start to kind of take control and do something about it, suddenly that weight is not so heavy, and it becomes more and more controllable and more manageable for you every single day. And I'm not sure that people start to look forward to taking control, but eventually they get to the point where it's not intimidating and it is doable. And once they get out of that hole and they start building and creating, then you watch them. I mean, not in a literal sense, but in a figurative sense, start to fly. They start to actually take off, and they don't have that weight crushing them. So I think it is very often absolutely life-changing. And I'm trying not to exaggerate, but that is the sense that people get when they do take control and feel like they're driving the ship now. It's not being driven for them, or no one driving it.
And it is like I think you can become addicted to your misery in the same way, and that's a weird way of putting it perhaps, in the same way as people become addicted to substances. And the only way you break addiction is by confronting it and admitting that there's a problem, and then tackling the root cause of the problem. It's probably a similar process.
It is, and I think also just to emphasize, I guess I'm repeating myself, but just to know you're certainly not alone. If you're listening to this thinking, gee, that's something I've got, and I'm ashamed, and I'm not going to talk to anyone. I'm embarrassed about this. Just understand there are millions and millions of people just in this country that have this the same version of a problem that you've got. And they're also sitting there feeling ashamed and embarrassed and not sure what to do. And I think just understanding that this is not something to be ashamed of. It's not something that you should be humiliated by. It's something that if you ask for help, it's amazing that the people that are close to you like to help. The people out there like to be of service to those that they care about. And they just need to know that you've got an issue. They need to know that they need to be there for you to talk you through it. And once you start that, you start getting a complete change in circumstances. And I think it's a big issue. We live with this every day, all of us, and to varying degrees, we all suffer from some form of financial stress or distress from time to time. Understand people next door to you are dealing with the same issue, and take control. And suddenly, the more you talk about it and the more you share your experiences, the lighter it gets for you and everyone else around you. And I know I sound like I'm trying to give a self-help talk here, but I think it's an important thing we need to understand. This is a real issue for all of us. Mental health is a big complexity for all of us, and it's relatively new to talk about.
And part of the mental health problem that we face is not just about money. It's about the environment in which we live and we operate. And we don't trust the environment. We don't feel that it's got our backs. We don't feel that our future is secure. And Trudy has sent us a question. On a day that the all-share index has hit 78,000, with interest rates at their highest levels in 14 years, with business confidence at its lowest levels in history, with consumer confidence down the pan, Trudy says, I don't understand. It's one of my favorite questions. I don't understand how the JSE has grown this year when the economy is in a disastrous state and politicians are embarking on potential harmful policies like NHI. Why are shares going up while the economy is going down? Favorite question, you answer it.
I think just to understand that our stock market is in no way a price of our economy. I think understanding that the big businesses that dominate our stock exchange earn most of their money outside of South Africa, and some of them are almost only listed here for historical reasons. Almost just a historical accident that they might have started in South Africa. And subsequently expanded to overseas and now earn far more money overseas and potentially very little or almost nothing in South Africa and simply still have a listing here. And if you think about a company like Naspers, and I think about a company like Richemont, they have a strong South African history, but the bulk of what they do is not South Africa anymore. And so when you look at the JSE and how it's performing, just understand that that's probably a bigger reflection of what the world thinks is happening in emerging markets and to another extent to companies that are in the resources sector. And those are starting to do a lot better because money is starting in a way to flow away from America again. People are starting to look at non-US places and sources for growth. And I think they are worried about the American Stock Exchange. And one of the big beneficiaries of that concern will be emerging markets. And therefore, why the JSE is starting to attract money again. And I think it's not a 1 week or 1 month trend. I think it could potentially be many months or even a few years where investors look for growth outside of the US. And South Africa is often a recipient of that kind of interest, and so is the rand for a matter of interest. One of the four biggest emerging market currencies for Japanese investors, for example. When they're looking for non-Japanese cash holdings, they look at the rand and 2 or 3 other emerging market currencies as well. So we are a favorite for places outside of the developed world, and people are certainly not globally looking at the South African economy and saying we want to buy into the JSE as a source of growth on the South African economy. They're looking at it and saying these are almost global emerging market businesses, and we think those are a great place to grow our money. So Trudy, that's the answer. It's unfortunately not because everyone thinks our economy is going to be booming anytime soon. It's because they think these businesses that are listed here are offering great value and will deliver good value in the months and years ahead.
Couldn't have done it better. Warren Ingram, thank you very much. He's a certified financial planner. He is also a regular contributor Thursday night, Personal Finance on The Money Show. Thank you for joining us.